It was a cold autumn morning, the kind of morning where the streets smelled of rain, and the wind cut through your jacket, no matter how tightly you held it shut. On the quiet corner of the city, next to a small rundown bakery, a boy no older than 12 stood with a tray of day-old pastries. His hands were red from the cold, his shoes scuffed and too small for his growing feet, but his eyes, those were the kind of eyes that carried both the weariness of survival and the stubborn spark of hope. "Can I sell you a pastry, sir?" the boy asked timidly to a passing man in a business suit. The man glanced at him briefly, frowned, and shook his head without slowing down. The boy lowered his gaze, tightened his grip on the tray, and tried again with the next person who passed. And again. And again. Each rejection hit him like a small pebble to the heart, but he stayed rooted to that spot. He had no other choice. His name was Ethan. His mother had fallen ill months earlier, her fragile body unable to work. The bakery had once been theirs, alive with the smell of cinnamon and sugar, but when bills piled up, and customers drifted away to bigger, flashier shops, the warmth of the ovens cooled, and Ethan found himself carrying the burden of survival. His father, well, Ethan had stopped waiting for him to come home years ago. Selling pastries on the street wasn't just about helping his mother, it was about keeping their lights on, keeping her medicine stocked, keeping the faintest glimmer of normal life from slipping through their fingers. But most people didn't care to know that. To them, he was just another poor boy trying to sell something no one wanted. Until that day, a man stopped in front of him. Not just any man, but a tall, well-dressed gentleman with silver hair, a fine coat, and a leather briefcase. His shoes alone looked more expensive than the entire bakery. Ethan straightened up quickly, his voice trembling as he offered, "Can I sell you a pastry, sir? Just one, please." The man looked down at him. His name was Victor Hale, though Ethan didn't know that. Victor was a millionaire, the owner of a real estate empire. He had everything: wealth, influence, the kind of power that made people lean forward when he spoke. Yet at that moment, he didn't see the boy as most people would. He didn't see a nuisance or a beggar. He saw something else. He saw himself. Years ago, Victor too had been a boy selling things on the streets. He had known hunger, rejection, and the heavy silence of nights when no one believed in him. Success had come later, but the memory of those empty, hungry days was etched into him like scars that never fully faded. "How much?" Victor asked softly. Ethan blinked in surprise. No one had asked that all morning. $2, sir," he whispered, almost ashamed of how little his pastries were worth. Victor reached into his wallet, pulled out a crisp $100 bill, and handed it to the boy. Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. "Yes, sir, I don't have change," he stammered. Victor shook his head. "Keep it. But tell me, why are you out here selling pastries alone?" And that was the question Ethan had been holding back tears over for weeks. His lips trembled as he explained: his mother's illness, the dying bakery, the endless bills, the fear that any day they might lose the little apartment they had. As Ethan spoke, passers-by slowed down to listen. Some shifted uncomfortably, others sighed and walked on, but Victor listened, truly listened. When Ethan finished, his small shoulders slumped under the weight of everything he had just confessed. He expected pity, maybe a pat on the shoulder, or perhaps nothing at all. What he didn't expect was for the man to kneel down to his level, look him in the eye, and say something that would change his life forever. "You're going to live with me." Ethan blinked. Surely he had misheard. "What? You and your mother," Victor clarified. "You're not going to freeze on the streets, not while I'm still breathing. From today forward, you're coming home with me." The boy's breath caught in his throat. His chest rose and fell as though the world had tilted on its axis. Nobody had ever spoken to him like that before, not with such certainty, not with such fierce kindness. His eyes filled with tears, but this time they weren't from despair. They were from the sudden, overwhelming weight of hope. Victor kept his word. That very day, he closed his business schedule, called his driver, and went with Ethan to the shabby little apartment, where his mother lay in bed, frail and coughing. When she saw her son return with a stranger in a suit, she tried to sit up, alarmed. But Victor knelt by her bedside, introduced himself, and said gently, "Ma'am, I know this is sudden, but I see the fight in your boy, and I know where he gets it. If you'll allow me, I'd like to help." No strings attached. Tears rolled down her face as she whispered, "Why? Why would you do this for us?" Victor smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried both sadness and redemption. "Because once, someone did it for me." And so it began. Ethan and his mother moved into Victor's home. It wasn't just a mansion, it was safety, warmth, and dignity. Victor paid for her medical care, enrolled Ethan in a good school, and even helped them reopen the bakery, not as a failing little shop, but as a beautiful cafe that drew customers from all around the city. He insisted it carry the name Ethan had whispered to him that first day on the street, Hope's Pastries. For the first time in years, laughter returned to Ethan's life. He wasn't just surviving anymore. He was growing, thriving, and dreaming again, and every time he looked at Victor, he carried a quiet thought in his heart that one day, he too would pass on the same kindness that had saved him. Years later, when Ethan was older, he often stood at the cafe's counter, greeting customers with that same spark in his eyes. And when a small nervous child once tugged at his sleeve and asked, "Can I sell you something, sir?" Ethan knelt down, smiled warmly, and said, "You don't have to sell me anything. Come with me, I'll help." Because kindness, when given, doesn't end. It multiplies. It echoes across generations, changing lives in ways we may never fully see. So remember, sometimes the smallest question, "Can I sell you a pastry, sir?" can open the door to a miracle. And if this story touched your heart, make sure to subscribe for more, because every act of kindness